Saturday morning, the cul-de-sac smells like fresh coffee and petty tyranny when I roll out of my garage in a van that's been completely carpeted in emerald green turf. Plastic daisies sprout cheerfully from the wheel wells, and a battery-powered sprinkler sits mounted on the roof, rotating slowly and creating a gentle mist that catches the morning sunlight. The HOA president, Lydia Prentice, stands in her driveway across the street, and I watch her face turn the color of a sunburned tomato. She screams at the top of her lungs, "You cannot park a lawn on a driveway," her voice cracking with indignation. The sprinkler continues its peaceful rotation, misting her clipboard with a soft spray that creates a tiny, glittering rainbow between us. I give her a friendly wave and back out of my driveway, the plastic daisies bobbing like they're laughing. My name is Evan Calder, and I am a quiet surveyor who likes exactly two things in life: neat property lines and being left completely alone. When I moved to Cedar Quay in Pinebrook Heights 6 months ago, I expected bird feeders, joggers in pastel workout gear, and maybe the occasional block party with lukewarm potato salad. What I did not expect was subpoenas, mail fraud investigations, and becoming a local legend. Let me introduce you to Lydia Prentice, our HOA president. She has helmet hair that never moves even in strong wind, a collection of pastel cardigans that could fill a boutique, and the moral certainty of an avalanche rolling downhill. 3 months ago, she fined me $50 for parking my work van in my own driveway because the commercial lettering on the side offended what she called the sightlines of the entire neighborhood. I am not joking. She actually used the phrase sightlines of the soul in the written notice. I tried to be reasonable. I peeled off the magnetic logos that said Calder Land Surveying with my phone number. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Lydia fined me again, this time $75, because according to her, the van still knows what it used to be. Those were her actual words in the second citation. The van knows what it used to be. Like my vehicle had committed some crime in a past life and was now serving time in my driveway. I called the HOA board to appeal, but Lydia had stacked it with her book club friends who nodded along to everything she said like dashboard bobbleheads. That is when Lydia escalated like a streaming service renewing a reality show for another season. She started taping notices of blight to my mailbox, which is actually illegal, but she did not seem to care about minor details like federal law. She posted photos of what she called my eyesore truck on the neighborhood's next-door page with the caption "Suspected Lawn Poacher." I do not even know what a lawn poacher is. I survey land, I do not steal grass. The comment section filled up with neighbors arguing about whether my van counted as commercial or just ugly, and someone started a poll about whether I should be allowed to stay in the neighborhood at all. Then Lydia claimed my van was leaking industrial fluids onto the street. She took photos of puddles under my van and attached them to a formal complaint. I had to explain to the county inspector that the industrial fluids were rainwater. From the sky. From actual weather. The inspector looked at Lydia's photos, looked at me, and just sighed like he had seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before. But Lydia was not done. She started conducting dawn patrols with a tape measure and a laser pointer, the kind people use for cats or possibly dictators planning invasions. She would measure the distance between my van and the property line, muttering into a handheld recorder like she was documenting evidence for a war crimes tribunal. The fines kept coming. $50, then $100, then $250. Each citation was signed with a dramatic flourish and featured a freshly invented rule. No commercial vehicles. No vehicles with vibes. My personal favorite was no vehicles that remember labor, which sounds like something from a dystopian novel about amnesia. I paid the first few fines because I wanted to keep the peace, but then I realized Lydia was never going to stop. This was not about my van. This was about control. She wanted me to know that she owned this neighborhood and everyone in it had to bow down to her clipboard and her pastel cardigans. The line crossing moment, the one that changed everything, was not the drone incident, though that was certainly memorable. Lydia flew a surveillance drone over my yard to document alleged violations. The drone clipped my wind chimes, spun out of control, and crashed directly into my hydrangea bushes like a drunk beetle. I have the footage. But the real turning point was the forged citation. I came home from work one Tuesday to find an official-looking letter in my mailbox on county letterhead. It threatened immediate towing and municipal sanctions unless I removed the offending apparatus forthwith. The letter had an official seal, a case number, and a deadline. Here is the thing. I work with the county. I know what their letterhead looks like, and this was not it. The logo was from 2007, back when the county had that terrible teal color scheme. Also, Lydia had spelled forthwith with 2 F's. Forthwith. I called the county code enforcement office and spoke to Janet, who I have worked with on about a dozen projects. She pulled up my address and said there were no open cases, no complaints, and definitely no threatened towing. Then I mentioned the forged letter. Janet got very quiet and asked me to scan and email it to her immediately. 20 minutes later, she called me back and said she had forwarded everything to the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Unit. She also said someone had looped in the United States Postal Inspection Service because Lydia had mailed the fake letter through the postal system. Congratulations, Lydia, I thought. Your HOA drama just went federal. Before the investigators even showed up, I executed my counterattack. I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles and re-registered my van as an art vehicle. This is an actual legal category in our state, usually used for parade floats and weird festival installations. The DMV clerk looked at my application, laughed so hard she started crying, and then stamped it approved. Next, I took my van to a custom auto shop and had them wrap the entire exterior in professional-grade artificial turf. I'm talking about the good stuff, the kind they use on putting greens. I routed low-voltage LED lights underneath the grass so it would glow softly at night. I added a tiny white picket fence grill on the front. I installed a Bluetooth speaker that played nature sounds, birds chirping, wind rustling through leaves, the occasional cricket. My driveway now hosted a rolling front lawn. No commercial signage, no business equipment, just pure horticultural whimsy on wheels. The county inspector arrived 3 days later to tour Cedar Quay and review the HOA complaints. He was a tired-looking man named Rick who had clearly seen every flavor of suburban nonsense. He walked around my van, knocked on the turf to make sure it was secure, and took about 30 photos. Then he read through the HOA bylaws while standing in my driveway. Finally, he turned to Lydia, who had appeared with her clipboard like a villain arriving on cue, and said in the driest voice I have ever heard, "Your bylaws regulate commercial vehicles by lettering and equipment, not by botanical audacity." He gestured at my van. "This appears to be topiary." Lydia's face went through several colors, from pink to red to a pale gray that matched her cardigan. The postal inspector was significantly less poetic. His name was Agent Kowalski, and he wore a suit that meant serious business. He showed up the next morning with a file folder and a badge. He asked Lydia directly if she had sent the letter threatening me with county action. She tried to deny it at first, stammering something about community standards, but Agent Kowalski cut her off. He explained that whoever sent this letter committed mail fraud, which is a federal crime. He had already traced the paper stock to a specialty print shop where Lydia had an account. He had her credit card receipt for custom letterhead. She went pale enough to match her French manicure, and I watched her realize in real time that she had made a catastrophic mistake. Lydia, now cornered and desperate, decided to stage what she called a community cleanup. At 6 in the morning on a Saturday, she arrived at my house with a rogue tow truck and a pair of industrial gardening shears. She announced loudly to the gathering crowd of confused neighbors that she was going to harvest the vehicle because it violated community standards. My dashboard cameras, I had installed 3 of them, front, rear, and one hidden in the roof sprinkler, captured everything. Lydia cutting through the turf skirt with her shears. The tow truck driver hooking a chain to my axle. The exact moment when my motion-activated sprinkler system turned on and soaked Lydia's clipboard, turning it into soggy papier-mâché in her hands. That is when the county officer pulled up. Then Agent Kowalski from the Postal Inspection Service. Then 2 squad cars from the local police department. Under the flashing lights, the tow truck driver immediately confessed that Lydia had paid him from the HOA petty cash fund. He showed them the receipt. The HOA treasurer, a nervous woman named Patricia, arrived still in her bathrobe, trembling as she handed over the financial ledger. The entries were right there in black and white. Community Aesthetics Initiative, $1,200 paid to Triton Tow. Neighborhood Standards Enforcement, $800 for unspecified consulting. Agent Kowalski explained, as kindly as someone can while arresting you, that commandeering a resident's property under a forged legal pretense and mailing threats across state lines is not aesthetics, it is a crime. Lydia tried to argue one last time that my van was noxious vegetation and a threat to property values. At that exact moment, my sprinkler rotated back around and misted her again, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that same afternoon and voted Lydia out as president by a unanimous vote. The state attorney general slapped the HOA with a consent order requiring them to refund all of my fines, amend the bylaws to prevent future abuse, and undergo mandatory governance training. Lydia herself was hit with 18 months of probation, full restitution of the money she had misused, and 200 hours of community service. The judge specified that she had to mow the median strips on Pinebrook Parkway wearing a reflective vest that said volunteer in large letters. Agent Kowalski recommended that she also take a class on not impersonating government officials. When the judge read out the sentence, Lydia stood there in her pastel cardigan with her mouth hanging open, unable to form words, while her lawyer put his head in his hands.